Once you finish playing through a great game, you naturally start anticipating a sequel. Unfortunately, there are tons of follow-ups to classic games that we may never get to play. Here are just a few. Star Wars Battlefront 3. The first game in the original Star Wars Battlefront series, a shooter in which players engage in battles set within the Star Wars saga, arrived in 2004. 2005's Battlefront 2 expanded upon the first game's content by including battles from Episode 3, in addition to other features. But instead of having Pandemic Studios continue the franchise, LucasArts partnered with Free Radical Games for their next iteration, and then suddenly canceled the project in 2008. According to Free Radical co-founder Steve Ellis, Battlefront 3 was canned because of a change in management. The worst part, as he told Games Industry, they effectively canned a game that was finished. And it's true. Over the years, bits and pieces of Battlefront 3 have trickled out online, including an hour of pre-alpha footage that leaked in 2012. But for most gamers, that's as close as we're going to get to playing it. And that's not the only Star Wars sequel we'll never get to play. Knights of the Old Republic 3. The first Knights of the Old Republic game is considered to be one of the best Star Wars titles of all time, as well as one of the best RPGs ever, with BioWare diving into an unexplored era of the Star Wars saga.
Commentary. It is not possible to destroy the Master. It is suggested you run while my blasters warm up, meatbags.
For the sequel, LucasArts partnered with Obsidian Entertainment, but due to development issues, the studio released an unfinished title that left much to be desired. The thing is, before LucasArts canned Knights of the Old Republic 3, Obsidian had already planned out the story for the rest of the trilogy, which would conclude with one of the galaxy's greatest characters, Revan, making a comeback. Obsidian project director Josh Sawyer told IGN that the lack of a third game came down to the second game just not being an extreme blockbuster, leaving LucasArts uninterested in continuing. With BioWare having already released The Old Republic as an MMO, most of the story's already been told anyhow. Sunset Overdrive 2. Sunset Overdrive was one of the first major Xbox One exclusives, and while it wasn't a blockbuster hit, critics loved the game. 2 years after Overdrive's release, a Microsoft Studios spokesperson was asked about the potential of a sequel and told GameSpot those dreaded 8 words. "We have no further news at this time." When pressed, Insomniac said they'd love to make a Sunset Overdrive sequel if given a chance, but Microsoft didn't seem to be on board with producing another game at the time. Insomniac still seems to be holding out hope for a Sunset sequel. At the 2017 DICE conference, studio president Ted Price said, "We are passionate about that franchise, and we own it, so you may see more Sunset in the future." For now, they're focused on Sony's PS4 exclusive Spider-Man game, but once that's done, perhaps they'll take another look at Sunset City. BioShock 4. BioShock is one of the most beloved and strongest-selling franchises in video game history. Researchers even cite it as an example of video games as a legitimate form of artistic expression.
And with the sweat of your brow, rapture can become your city as well.
And yet, a year after the release of BioShock Infinite in 2013, creator Ken Levine dropped a bomb on fans. Instead of going forward with BioShock 4, he decided to shutter Irrational Games. According to Levine, 2K Games would retain control of the franchise's rights, and it would be entirely up to them to make BioShock 4 without him, which they actually plan on doing, eventually.
And we ain't letting no false shepherd into our flock!
For now, though, it appears that they really don't have any intention of continuing the series. They even stealthily removed the iOS version of BioShock from the Apple App Store in January 2017. TimeSplitters 4. Free Radical Design just can't catch a break. First, they failed to get Star Wars Battlefront 3 going, and then they decided not to pursue a fourth TimeSplitters game when it became clear that the franchise's fanbase simply wasn't big enough to make it worthwhile, despite announcing the game and almost immediately shutting down. The studio entered insolvency and was acquired by Crytek, becoming Crytek UK. At the time, managing director Carl Hilton said the future of the TimeSplitters franchise hinged upon the direction of the market. Unfortunately, the overall performance of Future Perfect shot down any hope of seeing TimeSplitters 4 hit consoles. We'll probably never get another TimeSplitters, especially since the studio that created the franchise slowly collapsed into oblivion. Half-Life 3. Fans have been waiting well over a decade to play Half-Life 3. but in all likelihood, it'll never happen. And Valve co-founder Gabe Newell has a logical reason for why. They always seem to be working on something new, whether it's multiplayer games, Steam, or working on the HTC Vive. The thing is, the lack of a third installment isn't a phenomenon exclusive to Half-Life. It's something that plagues the entire company. All of Valve's franchises, including Half-Life, Team Fortress, Left 4 Dead, and Portal, have received sequels, but never a third game. Newell even joked about it, saying that the number 3 must not be said. And he's not kidding. Valve started releasing episodes after Half-Life 2, and they stopped at, you guessed it, Episode 2.
Maybe we still have
Time?
Perfect Dark 2. In the early 2000s, Rare was acquired by Microsoft, but that move might have been a big mistake. The studio that created classics like Battletoads, Donkey Kong Country, and GoldenEye was relegated to convincing people to purchase the Kinect. But what gamers really wanted was Perfect Dark 2. Instead of a sequel, the studio decided to take the story a step back and develop a prequel in 2005. Now, over a decade later, Rare still hasn't announced a sequel, and they probably won't. Microsoft Studios creative director Ken Lobb says they aren't working on a new Perfect Dark game. With that much time between games, there's an entire generation that has never played or even heard of Perfect Dark. Mirror's Edge 3. Mirror's Edge was a radical departure from EA's usual blockbusters, and when the studio commissioned a second installment in 2013, die-hard fans rejoiced. Anything beyond that, however, seems like a stretch. The reason? It's just not profitable. If gamers went out and purchased millions of copies of Mirror's Edge and Mirror's Edge Catalyst, they'd be inclined to make another installment in the series. At least that's what the company's EVP, Patrick Soderlund, wants people to believe. He told Polygon that the existence of a third game was up to the audience, saying, "If we can convince them that there's a market for this, then we'll make another one. It's too difficult and too much work to build a game that we know people probably don't want."
Patience never was your virtue, Faith.
Mirror's Edge may have its devout fans, but the player base is nothing compared to the likes of what EA has with Battlefield. Thanks for watching. Click the SVG icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.